Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be going over 5 more strong driller builds. For our first build, we're going to be using the sludge pump as our primary weapon, and we're going to be taking the Sabata as our secondary weapon. For the sludge pump, we are going to be running hydrogen ion additive, which is a clean overclock that just gets you more damage per second, which is very nice to have. It's a nice quality of life overclock. The way that I build the sludge pump when using hydrogen ion additive is like this. Although there's plenty of ways you can build it, it is a clean overclock after all, so there's not really a wrong way to build it. In tier 1, I like going with the larger puddles, although again, any of these are fine. Tier 2, I usually go with the more puddle fragments. Again, any of these are fine though in tier 2. Extra ammo in tier 3, I really enjoyed that one. Better ammo efficiency in tier 4, that way I'm just not using up as much shots, but if you like the faster charge speed, take that one. And then I like going with the acid in tier 5 to get extra damage per second out of this, but the slowdown is also pretty good. You're going to be killing things fairly efficiently. You can use this with regular shots, you can use this with charge shots. I think it benefits more from charge shots, and that's kind of the way that I build it, but both ways work very well with hydrogen ion additive. It's again just a bonus, gets you a little bit more damage per second, eats away things armor since that was added in season 2, which is pretty awesome. For a secondary, we're running everybody's favorite Sabata overclock, which is automatic fire. This just makes it so your pistol is now a submachine gun. That's about it. It's harder to control, but it's way more fun to use. The way that I build it is like this. Going to faster reload speed in tier 1, but larger mag size is also pretty good. Extra accuracy is also fine. Increased ammo in tier 2 and tier 3. Weak spot damage in tier 4, but you could just go with standard damage in tier 4 as well. It's not always easy to hit the weak spot with the fully automatic Sabata. It's not super difficult though either, at least for larger enemies. And then go into the MacTerra coating because we are not using this with fire. This is a great overclock to be running with the flamethrower. And you could still take it with this, but you need to have some way, or at least your team has to have some way of lighting your sludge on fire and doing it kind of reliably. Otherwise, it's not going to work out as well. You might as well just take the MacTerra coating if you're playing this solo, but if you are playing in a group, maybe go with the extra fire too, especially if you're maybe running all drillers and there's somebody running a flamethrower. For our second build, we're also going to be using the sludge pump, and this time we're going to be using the Goo Bomber Special as our overclock. This one is a bit of an odd one, but a very fun one, especially on like escort missions. When you use your charged up shot, it fires in a line, just like the Goo Bombers kind of drop their goo. So for this, we're just going to be building all for AoE and all for slowdown. I like going with the wider shots in tier 1, but velocity I find pretty useful. Honestly, all of them in tier 1 are quite useful for this build. Going with extra fragments in tier 2. Again, the other ones are great choices too. Extra ammo in tier 3, better ammo economy in tier 4, and then extra slowdown in tier 5. We are just going to be going for all the slows, where we're going to just be trying to set up a perimeter in some way, or just set down lines again on like an escort mission to where all the bugs pretty much have to run across it and they're taking damage. Very useful, especially if you have something to light it on fire, and for a secondary, we have something to light it on fire. For our secondary, we're going to be running heavy hitter with the EPC, and we're going to be building it for fire so we can light our sludge on fire, which is quite effective. You can actually light things on fire really fast with heavy hitter. It's been a little while since I used it, and I was really surprised how quickly you can kill robots. But for this, we are going to be taking extra damage in tier 1. You could go with extra ammo. I wouldn't really recommend extra AoE charge damage. We're not going to be using the charge shots with the EPC with this build whatsoever. There's no point in doing it. Heavy hitter only benefits from regular shots, so that's why we're just kind of going all for that. Tier 2, I like having the faster movement speed. We don't need the heat shield. That's again another charged one, so just go with the extra movement speed. Extra cooldown in tier 3 because the other two in tier 3 are just charge shot related, so not necessary. Extra ammo in tier 4. This one's just more useful than extra AoE and extra AoE damage. Again, we're not going to be using that. And then again, fire in tier 5. This is the best single target damage option that we have here. With this, I think you need to shoot your sludge 2 times. Just fire it twice at any part of your sludge and it should light it on fire. It's also very good, once again, for killing robots. Really good at that. Really good at killing MacTerra too. And this does make it so your EPC hits fairly hard. It's doing 40 damage per shot. This one, kind of like the last one, it's maybe going to struggle against long-range enemies. The EPC does not move very fast. You don't have fast-moving shots, so at long range, you're going to have to lead your shots quite a bit, and at that point, bugs might move in weird positions, or robots might move in weird positions. Not going to be a problem if you're shooting at turrets, though. And then Goo Bomber Special is not good at long range. It's good at close to medium range. And the sludge pump in general is not really great at long range, with maybe the exception of like AG mixture. For our third build, we're going to be running the flamethrower, and we're going to be taking sticky fuel as our primary weapon. This is probably the most ammo efficient driller build you can run, or at least one of them. Now you have 6 additional seconds of sticky flame duration as well as extra damage on those sticky flames. You do lose out on tank size, and you lose out on ammo, which is okay. We're going to be making up for that. In tier 1, I like going with the larger mag size. That's just to make up for our lack of ammo overall. Extra duration in tier 2, this gets us 11 seconds of sticky flame duration, so sticky flames sit on the ground for a very long time. Extra ammo in tier 3 and tier 4, however you could take slowdowns in tier 3 as well, I like that one too. And then heat radiance in tier 5, this is just so that we can light other things on fire that might be around us that we're not paying attention to. And then for a secondary, we're going to be taking the Sabata once again, and we're going to be taking oversized magazines. The reason why I'm taking oversized magazines, especially with sticky fuel, is that this kind of works well in combination with Born Ready. You can also do this with a sludge pump too. But if you take as much ammo as you can with the Sabata, you can't run out of ammo fast enough before Born Ready triggers for your primary weapon. And if you're taking the flamethrower with sticky flames like we built it, or if you're taking the sludge pump with anything, I believe, I think even Sludge Blast with like fast charge ups, you can't run out of ammo with that before your Sabata reloads. The way that I build oversized magazines is like this. So we're going with larger magazine in tier 1. We don't need faster reload speed. Accuracy's fine if you want to take that. Going with extra overall ammo in tier 2 and tier 3. That one's really nice. Weak spot damage in tier 4, and then fire damage in tier 5. So when we do put down sticky flames and anything gets lit on fire, and we just kind of sit there and wait for those 11 seconds for the fire to burn basically everything. It doesn't take that much fire to burn basically everything in this game. Then just pull out the Sabata and just kind of spam this into the group. Try to hit the weak spots, get that fire just sticking on them even longer. It works really well against big enemies like Praetorians. And then you just wait for Born Ready to reload your weapons, and you go back and forth between the two of them pretty much constantly. It's a very funny driller build, and it's probably one of the ones that makes use of Born Ready the best, because driller doesn't really make the best use of Born Ready, since you can't use it with 2 of your other secondaries and 1 of your primary weapons. Speaking of fun and strong, let's move on to our 4th build, where we're going to be using Ice Spear for the cryo cannon. Now, Ice Spear is a balanced overclock that actually doesn't come with any downsides other than a longer repressure rate. So if you do completely overheat your gun, it's going to take a second longer for it to repressurize. But other than that, it doesn't come with any downsides, and the upside that it has is that you can fire an Ice Spear out of your gun by hitting your reload button. Once you do this, it'll charge up a shot and fire out this Ice Spear. It costs a lot of ammo, which is okay because we're going to be making up for the amount of ammo, and it deals very high damage to single target. It technically can hit multiple enemies because it does have an AoE hit, but it's mostly just used for hitting big enemies really hard. Like, you can one-shot menaces with this on any difficulty, which is very nice. The way I build Ice Spear is like this, so going with faster freeze in tier 1, but any of them are good in tier 1, extra ammo in tier 3 and 4. I really like this because if I am using the Ice Spear frequently, it's going to eat through ammo pretty quick, and just having more ammo is nice. And even so, just using the standard cryo cannon without using Ice Spear whatsoever, it's still nice to have extra ammo. Faster rate of fire in tier 3, and then cold radiance in tier 5. That's to freeze things that we might not be paying attention to, that might be trying to get around us. Very similar to heat radiance, it's very useful for just clearing up things in a crowd. For a secondary though, we're going to be taking the wave cooker with blistering necrosis on top of it. Blistering necrosis allows us to potentially put blisters onto an enemy, and this is going to be useful for the Ice Spear because you can do massive damage to those blisters if you manage to hit them with the Ice Spear. You can actually straight up just kill big things like dreadnoughts super fast with this. It's surprising how well it works. It is kind of chance based because blistering necrosis itself is chance based. You're never going to be able to guarantee putting blisters on stuff. Anyway, the way that I build blistering necrosis is like this. Going with the extra ammo in tier 1, just useful, maybe proc it more often. We don't really need the other 2. Cooling in tier 2 so we don't overheat our gun as fast. Slow down in tier 3, very nice, just to have some extra utility on the enemies, especially if you have teammates that can shoot things at a distance. You can slow them down, and enemies and allies can hit them a little bit easier. Extra AoE in tier 4, but fast rate of fire in tier 4 is also really nice. And then I do have the endothermic reactor in tier 5. That's so that we can potentially trigger the temp shock and get extra damage out of this if we don't want to be using this as an Ice Spear build. So we kind of use this build in 2 different ways. One way for big enemies and one way for just crowds. The way for crowds, just use your cryo cannon across everything, then pull out your wave cooker, use it across everything, try to trigger that thermal shock, kill everything that you can. You can also just use your drills for this too. And for big enemies, try to use this, try to hit a weak spot with the wave cooker so that you can put a blister on it, and then fire an Ice Spear into it. You can kill big things like Praetorians and Oppressors and Dreadnoughts very, very quick with that. It makes it so they die very fast. You could also freeze them and then fire the Ice Spear into them as well. That's another good way of getting tons of damage on a single target as well. It doesn't usually work against Dreadnoughts though, because the amount of time that it takes for you to charge up your Ice Spear and fire it is longer than the Dreadnought has to break out of its ice. That can be less of an issue if you have somebody like a scout with cryo grenades or another driller with a cryo, and you see them building it up to about, maybe 75%, and then they throw their last grenade or freeze it the rest of the way. you should have enough time then for the charge up and for the ice spear to do massive damage to him. But it does take coordination from the group. You could also potentially do it with Bosco, but it's going to be more difficult with his cryo rockets. And it's going to be a lot of like micromanaging then. And then for our fifth and final build, we are once again going to be using the cryo cannon as our primary weapon. For an overclock, we are going to be using the improved thermal efficiency. This is a clean overclock that gives us more ammo and drops our pressure drop rate, which is a good thing. So for this, you can build it however you like building the cryo cannon, you can. This is the way that I usually build my standard one, going with faster freeze in tier 1, but I also like the faster turbine spin up in tier 1. That's pretty nice too. Going with longer reach in tier 2, you could go with ammo though. That one's also really nice. Extra rate of fire in tier 3, extra ammo in tier 4, and then cold radiance in tier 5. You're going to be just using this as a standard weapon to freeze basically everything that's close or medium range from you. It also, since you have the longer range, it is very nice for freezing flying enemies too, because if you freeze a flying enemy, they just die outright. So if you like the cryo cannon, this is just cryo cannon plus. And then for our secondary, we're going to be using an overclock that I didn't really like for the longest time, and I still don't know how much I honestly like it, but it is super fun to use. This is going with heat pipe. So heat pipe with the EPC, this is probably the most difficult overclock to actually use effectively, because what this does is make it so every charge shot you do consumes less ammo. However, your charge speed is up higher, both those are good things, and your heat charge per shot is increased quite a bit. So this is the way that I build a heat pipe. So we're going with extra ammo in tier 1, less heat build up in tier 2. This is very useful. Otherwise it takes, like, you only have a split second before you overheat your gun and you still have a very small margin. This makes it so the margin is slightly bigger, but not by very much. Faster charge speed in tier 3. I really like this one. I don't think you need the extra ammo efficiency in tier 3. The extra charge speed I think is far easier to use and to get used to. Extra ammo in tier 4, again, so that we can use it more often. Then thin containment filled in tier 5. This lets us do very high amounts of damage, but it is very difficult to use. And it also lets us do some EPC mining, so we can potentially get hard to reach materials from Driller. For the longest time, did not really like this overclock, and I still think it should probably get reworked a little bit. It used to be incredibly strong, one of the strongest overclocks in the entire game. Then it got nerfed and became arguably one of the weakest overclocks just because of how difficult it is to use. And it still kind of has remained that way, but it is a super fun overclock to use. And even if you don't plan on using it all that much for that, you can still use charge shots whenever you're freezing stuff with the improved thermal efficiency. So the build works by itself, but the build kind of works just because you have the thermal efficiency and the cryo cannon's pretty good. So that was 5 more strong builds of Driller. Hopefully this kind of helped you out or gave you some ideas for builds to try out. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. And special thanks to the supporters of this channel. I really appreciate all the support. If you guys would like to see more of my Deep Rock videos, there is a build guide playlist right over here. Click on that. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.